Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ben Thorpe with Farm Equipment Magazine. Welcome to our latest webinar in conjunction with TractorZoom. Today's presenters are TractorZoom industry analyst Annie Campbell and TractorZoom lead data scientist Hank Monsager. I believe I said that right. We talked about it. Before they get started with their presentation, just a couple things about the webinar. So there's a control panel at the bottom that you'll see with a Q&A icon. You can submit questions there anytime during the presentation. And then at the end, when we enter our Q&A portion, we will answer as many as we can before we run out of time. And we are recording the webinar, and we will have a replay of it available to everybody who registered later on farmequipment.com. So that's everything I had, and I will pass it over to you, gentlemen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. And let's get right into this. So like Ben said, my name's Andy, and I'm joined here by Hank. So whereas I take a lot of the data and try to interpret it for the industry, got a farming background. We farm up in northern Iowa. Hank, though, can dive deep into the data. And so he and I were able to pair up over the past few weeks, and we decided that we like pain. And so we wanted to go into trying to figure out what makes planters tick and the values. And really, we decided to take this on because we've been hearing from a lot of our dealer partners. And I've heard everything from witches brew to it gives me night sweats to these are the worst things in the world to try to value. So we decided to see if we could tackle and make some sense of planter values. Obviously, everybody out here knows that there's so many options on the planters that by the time you start to take one other option times another and times another, you're left with a lot of different possibilities. So that's why we decided to tackle this. But before we get too far into it, I know that some of the people on the webinar might not be familiar with who TractorZoom is. So let's take a second to show what TractorZoom is, what is it that we do here, and then we'll go into kind of a high level to a very in the weeds look at planters. So first of all, TractorZoom was started really to help connect farmers that were looking for equipment to be able to find that equipment. We started partnering with auctioneers back as early as late 2017, 2018. And then in, I believe, 19 to 20, but especially into 21, we really started partnering up with dealers and found a lot of success working with dealer partners to help put their inventory in front of as many farmers as possible. And so that's really the core of our business. It's just this place for farmers to be able to find what they're looking for. But in turn then, and it's a value partnership because we don't charge dealers anything, we don't charge auctioneers anything to be able to find or to be able to share their equipment listings. But it's a value trade to where now we can take that data and help those leaders, whether it be dealers, whether it be financiers, so farm credits, agricultural banks, help them make confident decisions about the value of the farm equipment and the inventory. So that's who TractorZoom is at the core, and then we do it through our product IronComps. So if you're interested in TractorZoom or IronComps, we'll have some opportunities for you to learn a little bit more throughout the webinar, and our contact information will be at the end. But in the core, that's who we are. And also, I know this is important to Hank because he talks about it all the time, but the data quality is key. And so I just wanted to give everybody a high-level overview of how much data are we talking about, what does it really cover, and just try to be transparent there. So like I said, we started in 2017 into 2018, started collecting that data, mostly from auctions. And then in 21 is when we started bringing in dealer data. And roughly, we think we've got about 65% of the entire used equipment market within the United States. A really high percentage probably of the auction market. And then we're growing, as you can see, pretty quick in terms of the dealer market share. So over 600 auction companies, over 1,300 roofs of dealerships, and then about $27 billion worth of equipment value that's situated within TractorZoom. And the reason why I want to bring this up again is to be transparent, but also we're going to go through a lot of trends on planters, of course, but then also I'm going to give you a high-level view of combines, sprayers, row crop tractors, and so you can have an idea of, hey, this isn't just like 10 things that have sold in the past month, but it's representing 600 auctions or 1,300 dealership stores, and that's the source of the data. Okay, so at a high level, here's what we're going to go through. I've just got one slide to kind of set the stage in terms of what does the ag economy look like right now. Then I mentioned combines, sprayers, row crop tractors. And if you've been on our webinars before, that'll follow a similar cadence. But with combines, one of the nice things that our data team and Hank here has done recently is broken it down in terms of class. And so we've done a little bit of work behind the scenes and now can divide that up between class 5 up to class 10 combines, which gives us some more granularity. Sprayers, self-propelled sprayers, and then a couple different categories of smaller horsepower row crop tractors, and then 300 plus horsepower. Planters, though, I'll start off talking about a model from Case, Kinsey, and Deere, but then I'm going to hand it over to Hank so then he can really dive deep into the weeds, and that's where it gets dirty. But he helps clean that stuff up and really starts talking about bulk fill, liquid fertilizer, and a few different row options. But one of the things, and Ben, sorry, was throwing this at you now. If you guys have questions during the webinar, we'd love to hear them. And so you can save them to the end if you'd like. But if it's timely and it's right in the middle, feel free to, I believe you can chat it or put it in the Q&A section or somehow send it in our way. And we might be able to answer it on the spot, or we can also answer it at the end. Okay, so just to set the stage, though, in terms of the ag economy, this was a graph that I got from a marketing conference I went to a couple months back on the price of corn, what it's been like over the past few decades. And on the far left, you've got all the way back to 1981. But in the black is the true value of corn at that point in time. And this is not in dollars per bushel, but this is actually in dollars per metric ton. But the red above it is inflation adjusted to 2022 prices. And so, we've been talking about inflation a lot lately, but really to put things in perspective, the past couple of years have been good in the ag economy, largely led by strong grain commodity prices. But they weren't as good as they were back in 2010, 2011, and 12. And we kind of knew that. But actually, they weren't also as good in terms of grain prices, inflation adjusted, of the mid 90s, or even back into the early 80s. And so just to put that in perspective, they've been good, but not the best we've ever had. But one other thing that you obviously see after all the peaks are that you have valleys. And this is one of the things in my grain conference that we discussed is you always have these long tails. And the best fix for a high price is a high price. More people join into the market, it eventually goes away. And so you go through a period of a valley after that. We've been through those valleys before. We know, a lot of us know what 18 and 19 were like. So at some point we are going to hit a bit more of a valley here, but when does it come? And one of the things to note though is today, that little star right there in 2023 is where the current corn price is in $2023. So not to say that we're definitively in that valley that's going to result in a long tail, because there's a lot of external stuff that's going on that could really flip the script in terms of supply or demand. But it's something to definitely be aware of, that we've had some nice times, and at some point they're going to end and we transition to a different type of farming economy. Okay, with that high note, then let's talk about some equipment trends. So I'm going to go through combines first, the different classes, and I'll move through those pretty quickly. Everybody will get copies of these slides. But then if you do have any specific questions on those, again, feel free to ask us later or during. But we work with Casey Seymour at Moving Iron Podcast. And so this is just a sample slide. There's a lot on it that I use when I discuss and talk on his podcast. But one of the reasons why I wanted to show it to you is because class 5s and 6s have been acting similar. And at a dealership supply, this piece right here, if you can see essentially this histogram in the top center of the dealers that we're working with, that's really where the supply of class 5 and class 6 combines are sitting on their lots right now. So you have a very normal bell curve going on, but it's moved to where there's very few being produced now. And dealers out there know that. But that's starting to be represented in the price and supply of these as well. That's why class 5s and 6s are in relatively similarly. So over the past year, at dealership, you have the top blue line, and then we also track auction prices. That's the bottom gray line. And the dealership average price for combines from this essentially right now to a year ago has increased about 10%, probably a little bit of new price drag there, but this is for SEP hours, 1,000 to 1,500. Auctions, though, it's been flat in terms of overall price. Some variability in there, but relatively flat. But we're seeing supply drop. At auction, it's about the same, but really the dealership supply this year over last is about 20% less sitting on those lots. Class 7 and 8 have been behaving similarly. They're essentially middle of the road. You can see from the supply curve up here that we're probably at peak production of those. Maybe it's going to go up a little bit higher, but I would expect this to behave like 5s and 6s eventually and kind of stabilize, stop climbing like that in terms of year-over-year types of production of those. And how they've been behaving, again, the top blue line is average dealership price by quarter. The gray line is average auction price by quarter. A lot more variability. One of the reasons why we have variability in this, more variability, is because in 2022, there wasn't much. And so you would have just a few sales that would swing this thing drastically. But after even normalizing that, and I had to do it by taking 3 months worth of data here, dealerships, about a 12% year-over-year increase. So greater than what we were seeing with 5s and 6s. But when you look at the auction, a little more modest price increase, around 9% year-over-year price increases at auction. Supply, though, we're seeing actually a few less 7 and 8s on dealers' lots right now than we saw a year ago. And that, the 7s are actually a little bit more, the 8s were less, and so averaging those out brought it down slightly, but it's close to flat. But last year we saw very few of these at auction, especially in the first quarter, January and February of the year. But we're starting to see a resurgence of that supply. And so we saw a little bit of this last year, more supply of these combines at auction in Q3 and Q4, and we're continuing to see that now into Q1 for class 7 and 8 combines. And then finally, you've got 9 and 10. Just quickly looking at the supply piece here, they're just ramping up. And so there'll likely be even more made next year. That's not a big surprise to many of you dealers out there because you're having to put those on your lots. And then also from a price increase standpoint, and before I show you the year-over-year price increase, I do want to call out my analysis here for these 9s and 10s had to include everything less than 1,500 SEP hours. Just first of all, because there's not a lot more out there that are more than 1,500 SEP hours, but to really give a big enough sample size to draw an average from. But dealer, for this group of 9s and 10s, almost a 20% year-over-year increase on those prices. Auction, though, there weren't many out there, and people that wanted them badly. Almost a 40% year-over-year price increase for the average 9 and 10 at auction. And supply, a lot more. Like I said, that whole supply curve is growing, so a lot more at dealerships, 30% more year-over-year. Auction, 300% is a little deceiving because when you have very few in 2022, you're going to have more in 2023. But it's starting to be more of a thing at auctions where you'll actually see these hit the auction block. Okay, I'll be a little quicker on sprayers here, just one slide. And really the story on sprayers for ones that are 1,000 to 2,000 hours, fairly consistent, 11 to 13% price increase at auction and dealership. And then a supply, we've seen probably 6 straight quarters of supply decreases on sprayers, but it's starting to turn around slightly, and you can kind of see that here. I'm looking at Q1 of 2023 versus Q1 of 2022, and starting to see that uptick a little bit. Now, it's only been one quarter where that supply's really jumped, but it might be something where it's turning around in terms of overall supply. So a slight increase at dealership of 4% and a more significant increase at auction. And then finally, for tractors, like I said, row crop tractors, I have these split into a 175 to 300 horsepower category, and then next I'll go 300 plus. But really, they've been acting similar. Hours, 1,000 to 3,000 hours. Year-over-year price increase of 13% at dealers, 17% at auction. Now I would say tractors of all the equipment categories that I look at, I I see these things continuing to go strong and really behaving like we saw a lot of equipment behave last year. Whether it's all the supply is not being fulfilled by the OEMs, and there's still that high demand out there. Obviously, tractors are multi-use tool. I just see them being a strong piece of this ag equipment market, whereas combines and sprayers might have softened a little bit. Supply, that's the thing. When you have price going up and supply going up, then you know that that market continues to be strong. Now, in larger tractors, so your higher horsepower, still row crop tractors, I'm seeing the only red that pops out right on the way in the screen is this supply, and it's going down, but I think it's not because the demand's not there. I just don't think as many are being sold or being auctioned off. But dealer supplies see that going up, just like you saw with those slightly smaller ones. But year-over-year price increase similar to what we saw before, about a consistent 15% year-over-year. So anyways, I know I went through that stuff a little bit fast, but we wanted the focus of the webinar to be primarily on planters here. So let's dive into planters. Okay, and what we're going to do next is I'm going to dive into a Case IH 1255. We're going to look at a Kinsey 3660 and then a John Deere 1775 NT. And I wanted to get three different models that weren't exactly the same, still ones that were sought after, that there's a fair amount of volume on there that we can start to trend. But those three types of planters are certainly not interchangeable. And I think it was actually the 3660. It might even be looking at a 31 row on that one. But you can start to tell the story of the industry a little bit. And it also brings up some questions then that I get to shovel over to Hank and get him to try to answer. Okay. And I also should mention that we've got a great feature within Iron Comps that I was trying to pull a data slide on, and I was going to make a graph. And within Iron Comps, it pulls a better graph and more recent information than I can possibly make myself. So I just simply took a screenshot straight up within Iron Comps. And towards the end of the presentation, if we have time, I'll pull up Iron Comps for those of you that are familiar with the tool and show you how you can get this yourself. But anyways, starting with the Case IH 1255, really what we're seeing over the past year, the blue line on top, that's average dealer listing value. And then the green line on bottom is average auction, rolling average there. So with this one, still seeing a decent price increase year over year, about a 12%. The auction on this one is flat. And this brings up maybe a bigger question that I would like to ask the audience. You can take it as a rhetorical one or actually answer it. That you see this one green dot right there, that represents one recent auction sale of this type of planter that happened in January. There's been very, very few of these planters that have come up for auction, I'd say within the past 4 or 5 months. And then I started looking broadly across all planters, and I'm seeing a decrease in planters at auction, good quality planters at auction over the past like 6 to 8 to almost 12 quarters. And my question to you is it really worth a farmer to take these to auction anymore? If it's a highly specialized planter, is it better to have them traded into a dealer? Or, and I know this is a growing trend that we'll hit into a little bit later, are they kidding it? Are they simply swapping out for what they need? They've got the bar and they're doing things almost modularly on their own. So again, take it almost as a rhetorical, but I'm curious. Okay, the John Deere 1775 NT. Again, a little newer of a planter on these. And this data set here, I should mention that I've got filters on this one and the previous one. Right. You can see it right here on the filters that I've applied in Iron Comps. These are just 24-row planters for both of these models. But the 1775 NT, this sample set, much newer, so much more recent model, starting to grow in auction values year over year. Dealer values a little bit more modest growth on those, but with at least 1775 NT, and I know it's a very popular model, seeing relatively some recent auction sales, even though it's less than what they have been historically. Now, the Kinsey 3660, less of these at dealership within our data set. So that creates a little bit of that variability that you see, the jaggedness, but taking a rough average of what it is currently versus and extrapolated. I took 6 months ago, and then there's a 4.5% over 6 months. So I grew that out to 9% annually. Again, seeing a very similar dealer price increase year over year, to kind of right in between what we saw from Case and what we saw from Deere. The bottom one, though, I think is one of the more interesting trends that I've seen. And it's not alone to this Case 3660. And I really don't believe it's because these things are less valuable or even less sought after. And so my question to you, again, rhetorical or not, and then Hank's going to dive into this, is, if I would pull this back another year, even longer than a year, what I would see is a lot more auction values that are sitting up here in the $100s to $120,000 value for the same type of planter. This is a 31-row planter, but they're sitting way up here. And my theory has always been, and I've talked to other people that specialize in planter sales, used equipment managers, and they think it might be happening too, is the skimming is happening, where farmers are particular, they know what they want for their operation, whether it be they've got a certain soil type and they want to have precision, whether it's a size to get around a hilly field, one with a lot of fingers, or one that's big and flat and they want a wider planter. They're particular for good reasons. Are they taking the high quality things that are available on the lot? And so what happens then is what's available is lower quality, maybe less tech on it, and that's dragging the resulting average down over time. So I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but in order to try to figure that one out, we kind of have to know what all these extra things are and what they're actually worth. So that's why I want to hand this over to Hank, and then I'm going to let him run the ship here in a second, because he's going to talk about dealer premium, bulk fill, liquid. We're even going to get down to ExactEmerge and a lot of other variables. So I've been talking too long. I'm going to hand this over and let Hank run the ship.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So like Andy mentioned in the beginning, he's got the industry expertise. And so the way we've been working over the last month is he'll fire over questions to me to see if we can answer some of these questions with data. So our first question we're going to talk about is the dealer premium. And I'm going to kind of go through this slide a little more slowly, because the following slides are going to look very similar, so you guys can understand how I did this analysis. If you have any questions at the end, please feel free to let me know. I often look at rolling averages. So in this case, you'll see rolling 30-day median price. That helps me kind of smooth out the noise a little bit, particularly you get spikes in auction sales because there's so few. It helps make it a little bit smoother and the analysis a little bit easier. On this chart, you see auction and dealer with a pretty wide spread. There's some caution there. Like we said, there are a lot fewer auctions planters than dealer listings. So it's almost 9 times as many dealer listings or dealer sales as auction in a given month. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind as we move through some of these charts. The way I answered the question of dealer premium, because there's so few auction sales, is I wanted to look at the more popular models that had a decent amount of data, both at auction and at dealer. So these are the top 10 models in our database in terms of volume sold. You can see a couple of them. The DV60, for example, doesn't actually have any at auction, but for the rest, they do have decent auction sales, and we can do some of that analysis. So when you put these planners together, you see that spread is quite a bit smaller. And then when you look at the numbers themselves, on the right is the dealer premium as a percentage of that dealer price. So in general, you're looking at a dealer premium in that 20 to 30% range, depending on the type of planner. Obviously, there's seasonality there as well. Take this with a pretty big grain of salt, just because there's so much variability and just the lack of data on the auction side. Comparing this, you can calculate dealer premiums with tractors much easier. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a quantitative feel for it, but definitely take this with a pretty large grain of salt. The other component, really the first component I took a look at here was bulk fill. At the bottom, you see we're looking at 12 to 31 row planners. That's where we have a lot of data. We tend to see people buying a lot of. If we expand it out both lower and higher, you get a lot of noise. So we focused on where the market is for the most part. And you see, obviously, in general, there's a large premium put on bulk fill. You even see that across all the row types. So one thing that we want to keep in mind, and I did some investigation on, is bulk fill might be a relatively new feature for planters. So even if you focus on planter model years of 2015 or newer, we're still seeing a 30 to 40% premium on bulk fill. 12 row planters, we're seeing a mean average price without of about 23,000, and then with bulk fill 85,000. So it is a significant premium on those smaller planters. And as you get up towards the 24 row, it's still a large premium. We're looking at an average price of about 105,000, but with bulk fill closer to 160,000. So still a large premium, but for those smaller planters, it can be quite significant. The next feature I took a look at was liquid fertilizer. Still does 30-day rolling averages and still the 12 to 31 rows. The one thing that's different here is that we're not really seeing as much of a premium, particularly lately, for liquid fertilizer coming into the Q1 and starting into Q2 of this year. Even looking at planter size, it's pretty much outside of the 12 row planter. We're not seeing much of a premium. And when you look at other features, drive type, downforce, bulk fill, we're not seeing liquid fertilizer stand out as a premium feature on planters today. Obviously, we want to hear your feedback and hear people's thoughts. We have lots of hypotheses here on why that may be, but that's just what the data is saying right now.
And one thing, when Hank brought this up to my attention at first, I thought it was counterintuitive. I was assuming that liquid fertilizer, the opportunity to put it on application while you're planting, that possibly one must pass on the field, and the benefit that it provides is great. But once he did start to show that it's a bit of a mixed bag there, then I started asking a couple of farmers that we work with, and then they're talking about the weight that it requires, the extra labor that goes into, if you have a larger planter, so probably not 12, but much larger, then you've got the weight, you've got to refill it, you've got to have the capacity to have somebody drive a truck and service it, and it becomes an impediment for your planting process. And especially if you're going something at a slightly higher speed, use up more faster. And so it started to make a little bit more sense of why you'd have a mixed bag on something like this. But again, I think it's probably regionally dependent, or at least, for sure farmer dependent. But again, one of the things that we'd like to pose out there, it'd be nice to hear your feedback on what everybody else is seeing across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Next feature we looked at was the drive type. Exact same chart layout here with the rolling average and then the 12 to 31 rows. We see a very large premium on electric drive type. So we included in that ExactEmerge, early riser, and then other third party row units as well. One thing that is interesting with this drive is there are a lot of listings that don't specify in any way that we can meaningfully digest. So there are a lot of unknown drive types as well. So keep that in mind as we do some further analysis there. We see this drive type premium true for all the row sizes. Even when you take out ExactEmerge and early riser, we still see that premium on that third party aftermarket electric drive.
And Hank, because again, Hank's graphs are way better than mine ever are. So it takes me a while to understand too. So the blue line that we see on electric across the top, so it's about 200,000 on average, whereas the green hydraulics say it's about 100,000. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that if planter all else is equal, if one's got electric, one's got hydraulic. Is it really worth 100,000 more, or what does that separation tell you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one thing you want to keep in mind is there's going to be some covariance here as well. So electric's new, which means they're probably put on newer planters, and newer planters are going to be worth more as well. So just because this line is 200,000 versus the green line at 100,000, that doesn't mean it's worth twice as much. You want to also look at how new the planter is, the size of the planter, and then other components as well. Okay. So this is really just looking at drive on its own, but you got to keep in mind that a hydraulic's going to be a slightly older planter, more likely.
Okay.
So one last feature before we get into ExactEmerge and the more specific types is downforce. Similar here with the electric drive, we see the hydraulic downforce being a premium, except on the smaller planters. I believe the 12-row planter, we're actually seeing pneumatic downforce being a slight premium, but they're almost equivalent in terms of their value across the board for 12 rows. On larger planters, you're seeing the hydraulic become more of a premium. With 16-row, you're looking at an average of 113,000 for hydraulic and then 87,000 for pneumatic. And then once you get up to 24-row, you're seeing an average of 223,000 for hydraulic and 132,000 for pneumatic. So definitely seeing that premium feature for hydraulic, and it seems to become more of a premium feature as you grow in your planter size.
And this brings up a point too that, in our operation, we've always had similar size of tractors, so it hasn't really occurred to me as much until we dive into the data.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gets to a larger point on planters and why there's so much variability is it's worth what a farmer's going to pay for it, which is partially, maybe even largely dictated by what they have to pull it, which with the smaller 12-row planter, possibly you've got less hydraulic hookup capacity. And so at some point, you just run out of hookups, and unless you're going to upgrade the plant, upgrade a tractor. So just something for everybody out there to keep in mind too, that we can give you a little bit of things that are directional, but at the end of the day, a lot of it is very dependent on fitting the needs of the farmer who's got a lot of those unique variables to his or her operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last caveat here too is that unknown line, just like in drive type, there was a significant number of listings where we couldn't actually pull out what kind of downforce was on that planter. So just another piece to keep in mind as you're looking at this data. So now we'll dive into ExactEmerge. This chart's slightly different in that I only pulled newer models. So obviously 2015 is the first year we saw that on the market. So I didn't want to compare ExactEmerge planters with older John Deere tractors or planters, sorry. So what I did here is I limited everything to 2015 and above over the last year. And you see a pretty strong premium here on ExactEmerge. An interesting trend, if you've noticed over the past few slides, is there on those premium options, so ExactEmerge, electric drive, hydraulic, you see a pretty sharp drop off after Q1 of each year, likely because those are going before that planting season. And so you see less of a drop off in some of the secondary or tertiary features. So just an interesting thing I noticed as I was working through the data, and we'll see hopefully that same trend in 2023, so we can kind of forecast out what those decreases will be after Q1. And then the other thing here too is we're seeing a really strong premium for ExactEmerge on these smaller planters. So if you're looking at a 12-row, you have about a 77% price premium by having ExactEmerge versus not. And as you get up into the larger planters, 24-row, it's closer to 40%. So you're seeing 12-row planters with ExactEmerge, be 80% higher almost than without. So that's something that you'll probably see in the market, and that's what we're seeing in our data.
Yeah, and when Hank first showed me those statistics about the price premium on smaller versus larger, I thought it was counterintuitive because you're actually getting fewer. You're only getting 12 versus 24. Why would you pay more for row option with that? So I know we called up some dealers that we work with, and actually called one specifically down in Missouri, Nathan, and I think it's Yield Tech Services. They specialize just in planters. Started talking about this, and he said he's been seeing a growth in smaller planters, and his theory was that farmers are saving some capital that they might have spent on a larger bar to cover more rows, more field in the past, and they're saving that capital by going smaller bar, fewer rows, but they're essentially tricking out those rows as much as they possibly can to get the right type of seed placement, the right kind of spacing, the right kind of emergence that they exactly want. And they can speed it up a little bit. They might not still be running a 10-mile-an-hour planter at a truly high speed, faster than they were before, but He said they're really going and taking quote their time to just do it right, but spend the money per row unit to do it right instead of get it done right away. So anyways, that was his theory. Again, I'd be interested if you're having those conversations with your farmers, if they're experiencing the same thing.
Right. So I've got two more here just to go through some data. This one takes a step back and looks at the market as a whole. So we have auction data, as Andy said, going all the way back to 2018. So what I did here is I wanted to give you guys a picture of are there any changes in terms of OEM and their prevalence in the marketplace. So on the John Deere side, we saw it oscillates, you see, from 2018 to 22, but roughly in that 60% range. The one interesting point I want to bring up for everyone to pay attention to is we're seeing Case IH in that Kinsey gap shrink over the last couple of years. You see Kinsey dropping and Case IH coming up in terms of their percent of total planters in the auction market. And so we'll be looking to see if that trend continues into 2023. Obviously, with just one quarter under our belts, it's too early to say for certain in 2023, but that's a trend we've noticed over the last few years.
And we've got a question that we're going to answer here in a second. I don't know that you probably hit on that last slide because it's a great takeaway, but I can kind of Hank can address it better. I can show you a little bit within our accounts how I address it. But the question is that it would be interesting to see the quantity of sample size to be able to validate if the trend is right or to be able to eliminate outliers. And so that's one of the things I'm going to show you iron comps so we can actually take a look and literally see what outliers might be and what's driving those outliers, if they are. But I know this is something that Hank knows way more than I do about. So I don't know, Hank, do you want to address this one now?
Yeah. So the question that came in would just asking would be interesting to see the number quantities to be able to validate or eliminate outliers. So Andy's approach, visually looking at it with an iron comps is a great one. It gives you the ability to see with your own eyes, pictures and value and details of that machine. I've built quite a few tools internally that help us automatically detect outliers through machine learning and other techniques. So 100% the quantity on particularly the auction side, that makes, that's kind of been the reason we've given those caveats of you want to be careful looking just at auction data because there's so few, but the dealer data is pretty strong across the board. So my last chart for you guys is more of a fun one. It's where I live every day in that machine learning, AI analytics space. So when people see machine learning models, they think that, oh, it's just going to give me an answer. And one thing that you can do actually with machine learning is help you understand why things are priced the way that they are in our example. So what I did here is just a pretty simple example to show you guys how you can use machine learning to really show what's the most important thing or feature about my planter. So what I did is I took John Deere planters and I wanted to understand, how important was something like ExactEmerge from a machine learning perspective relative to all the other factors, its size, how new it is, its usage, and that sort of thing. So what I did here is I'm showing you a relative importance based on that feature for a pretty simple machine learning model. And what that tells me is you've got to kind of move down the line when you're valuing planters. So everyone here on the call probably understands size drives the value. 12-row planter is going to be significantly different in price than a 31-row planter. So that's great because obviously the machine learning model is picking up on things that we intuit naturally. But what it does is it provides a quantitative measurement. So as you drop down to year, you're seeing about a 25% impact of value based on the year, whereas the number of rows was pushing 50%. So you can see there that relative importance of year is roughly half that of the number of rows. And then you go down to the third, features and usage, you're looking at maybe 25% across ExactEmerge and usage in terms of determining planter's value. So that's not to say that this model would be perfect in predicting a planter's value, but it does do a good job of being able to give you at least a rough cut at the relative value of each feature, each feature's impact in and that price of the planter. So this is a toy example that it's something we do internally at TractorZoom, and it's one of the reasons a lot of dealers can find value in partnering with us and using our products is we do this on the internal side to help dealers price out their equipment.
And it helps me try to understand it.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things another question too. Okay, we had a good question come in from Michael. So what do you mean by auction market? Ones that are sold used planters
At auction. Yep.
So correct. So anything that we've stated that's, hey, this is the auction market. So I have my blue line, I have my green or gray line that was below it. Those are actual confirmed sales that have happened at auction. The top blue line is a dealer list value and on mine there were what has been sold. So once it comes off the lot, what was the last list price, which is probably higher than what it is actually sold for, because you'll have some trade in and some negotiation. But and recently, I think a lot of prices have been closer to that dealer list value than historically. But those are the two lines and what that actually means. One thing I wanted to show then, we're going to see in this transition here. Let's jump over to Iron Hills. And again, half of our partners are teaching me things more than I'm probably teaching them. So I've got to throw some thanks back out to Josh Martin, because this was something that he was using in his practice. That here I've got pulled up John Deere 1775 NT and the planters that have ExactEmerge within their filter description. Because I know if you're sorting for comps out there, and if you're going to multiple sites and then trying to find ExactEmerge on top, you could be spending hours just surfing the web and not getting very far. So this is one quick tool where this is where we want to end up. I'm going to show you how to get there from scratch. You just kind of go into our search results here. Say, okay, I'm interested in a John Deere. And then let's go with that's 1775 T. So I want to look at all those, but knowing that it's a popular John Deere model, there's a lot of different types. There's some with 16 rows or some with 24. I just, for the sake of this, I'm valuing a trade-in that's 24 row. And so I just wanted to find that there. So now I can see that, okay, I have 79 of these 1775 NTs in here, but 37 of them that have sold at auction. So if I'm looking towards more liquidation value, I have 37 to compare to that are 24 row. On the dealer side, if I wanted to look at those, I have 465. So getting back to that end question of how many are we pulling from, 37 if we're looking at auction, can still be shaky. 465 at dealer list value. That provides some pretty reliable numbers. But even beyond that, like Hank was saying, ExactEmerge drives value. So again, about half of those auction values have ExactEmerge, which is similar to what we've been seeing in a lot of our data analysis of this model. About half come with that. And again, similar finding here on the dealer side, 235. Now, one of the nice things within this, now I know my end if I want, and this is where I'd really suggest if you're truly trying to find a comp, you're going in here and you can click in to each one. Say I'm looking at 2019 because now I know that my rows matter most, my recency matters second most. If I'm looking just at 2019s, I could either put that in over here on the year and cycle just down to 2019s, or I can go in here and say, I just want to look at 2019s, and then I could manually go through here. Let's say 2018, I think it's close enough. No, there's another 2019, but I want to look into those. Now I've got my selected average up here at 255. This helps me get to a comp a little bit faster. One of the things though that you can also do, and this is where I do a lot of my data analysis now that that we have these search results and market trends right in search results. This is pulling all of our data, so it's usually goes a little slower than that. This is super fast right now. There we go. So now I can look at for 24 rows that have ExactEmerge in the description, I can start to trend this over the past year. and I can see individual auction sales of where this has happened. And this is what I'm talking about when I say, some of this higher tech is very sought after. You're looking back here, essentially last year, here are 3 auction sales that took place with 24 row ExactEmerge 1775 NTs. Here's an example of those selling at auction this year. So now you can really at a more granular level start to see, where this is happening. And then getting to that outlier question. If I did see one, and I don't see one here that's a great outlier because probably I've narrowed in enough, but let's say if that guy was an outlier, I can go back into here and see exactly which one, the details on it, and was there something else on it? Maybe it came with the monitor. Maybe there was something wrong with it that you had to buy it as is. So that's one way that I go into here and look at a granular level, make model, and start to figure out what the trends are. So a couple more questions that we've had. Dominique had the question of, what are the conditions for merge 1 and 0?
Yep. So merge 1 means ExactEmerge is present, and 0 means it is not. And that's our best estimate. So you see here in Iron Comps, Andy used ExactEmerge. I went a bit deeper, and I use natural language processing to try and do a bit more to figure out, is it truly ExactEmerge or not? But essentially the same idea was how we got those flags. So a 0 means that it's printing, and a 1 means it's present.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. If it's 0 or 1, essentially it doesn't mean that 0 also has, like if it doesn't have ExactEmerge, it should be priced the same. It just means it influences the price.
Exactly.
So you really expect those two, if this is done well, be almost similar.
It could, yeah. And that it would be influenced by unknowns. So it could neither be a 0 or a 1 in one sense. But I think for the ExactEmerge, it's a pretty good data set, because when people are listing a planner with ExactEmerge, they're advertising that that's a feature because they know that that's going to help it sell.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the next question, and this is fantastic. And so Matt, good to see you on the webinar. So Matt was asking, have you had a chance to analyze planners that have had retrofit kits installed? So for example, customer spends $100K on a planner upgrade and then wants to trade it 3 years later. How much did it depreciate? And so for this one, we haven't had the chance to dive into this too much yet. Mm-hmm. But from what I've seen, both on the farm, talking with other dealers, and just in trends, that if, the kits are not going to increase the number of rows that it has, it doesn't change the year. It's tough to make, I'm talking from a farmer standpoint, it's tough to see a great return on getting a trade in like that. I was even talking to Casey in Moving Iron Podcast, and he really sees the industry going more towards kind of a modular standpoint where they do trade that in. They might trade back in the bar, but they're going to take those kits off and deal with those in the aftermarket, or maybe they pull the kits off separately and trade those back into you guys. I don't know, but again, because you have to turn around at not $100,000, but at a fraction of that, and try to find somebody else that values that exact same combination the exact same way. It is going to be hard for you to be able to make that deal work. And so the way that I likely see it going is a lot of farmers will realize that the trade-in value is not there. So they might buy a new bar and they might keep the same kits. So I don't know. I'm not answering your question for sure because we haven't done the analysis yet. You really get into like a third and a second degree, the third and fourth type of analysis, and your variables just get astronomical. So I don't know if statistically we could say anything, but but that's where I see the industry going in more of a modular standpoint. And so from a depreciation standpoint, a lot, but I don't know on a number.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. And in our analyzing the descriptions of listings, it can be very difficult to piece together exactly what components were added to a planter, and then being able to compare those across multiple instances to be able to draw that trend is extremely difficult with how many variations there are.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So sorry, but I know that that's happening a ton. We're even looking at our planner of adding smaller kits, smaller components to it, but but knowing that you're not going to be able to probably get the value out of that if you go back to trading them. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. We've had some great ones so far. The one thing I did want to mention, well, actually, and Ben, from your standpoint too, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. But I don't want to cut anybody off.
All wrapped up.
Oh, I suppose in finality of it, we have covered a lot of the content. I shouldn't cut it short. You know, just from a high level summary, this is just a reiteration of what we've seen. That, you know, Fed, everybody knows, yesterday moved up about 0.25%. We'll see what that does, if anything, to commodity markets. But I think for sure that we probably have come off of a commodity high, short of something, you know, devastating happening somewhere in the weather, or China reversing a trend. But equipment trends, by and large, 6 and lower combines are slowing down, 7s, 8s flat, higher increasing, but about a 12-15% return of supply over things that we've seen last year. But row crop tractors continue to hum along. And then on a planner standpoint, like Hank said, just note that dealer listings have at least 10%, 9-10% more volume than what auctions do. And we're just seeing less and less planters at auction. So dealer right now is where I go instantly if I want to find a comp. And then, like I said, bulk fill, good across the board. Liquid fertilizer, a little bit of mixed results, except for 12 row. And then one of the things that we do want to make an ask for the people on the webinar, even if you don't want to ask a question now, like that one in a second, but I want to throw this up now. Here's my email, and here's Hank's email. Shoot us questions. We love to hear from you. This is how we learn and how we dive deeper into questions that really matter to the industry. So then we can get back to you with answers. But then, like I said, at the same time, we also learn. So, you know, we're looking at for future analysis as well. So let us know what needs to be analyzed. And then in total reverse order here, we get our data from the partners that we work with. And so this isn't everybody, but it's everybody can fit on one slide in short order. So thank you to all the partners we work with. And then, yeah, and I can talk about this finally, unless you have another question.
I did not. It looks like you guys ran through some great questions. I'll leave a few minutes here at the end in case anybody has one they wanted to ask before we wrap up here. But one thing I wanted to ask was for dealers who may not know, Andy, how can they list on TractorZoom?
Okay, good. So the easiest way, if you have Hank or my email, just reach out to us and then we can walk you through it. But if you're at least 1% tech savvy, if you go to tractorzoom.com, you can click on dealers and then sign up. And the sign up process is just merely like 5 fields, and it's for free. And so we now have, 50 plus dealers that work with us on just listing their dealerships listings on there. We do the heavy lifting. So it's essentially phone call, conversation, and then we just send leads to your website. And so it's probably about the best thing out there since sliced bread, but it is incredibly easy to use. And we really focus on trying to make it as simple as possible for farmers to find the right equipment for themselves. And then we're not collecting leads or anything. We're just simply directing those interested buyers directly back to your site so they can get in contact with you. And the value trade, the reason why it's free is because then all of the information aggregated together is what you just saw. And so we can share market trends on dealer listings. And then we do the same partnership with over 600 auctioneers across the country too. We list everything for free, and then we're able to aggregate the data to help people make educated decisions about the market. So, but yeah, good question. Data comes from TractorZoom, and that's how you can do it. Either we will walk you through it, I will do it personally, or you can go on your own and sign up.
Very good. Okay. Well, I have not seen any other questions come in, so then I will wrap us up. As a reminder, for everybody who attended today's presentation and audio will be available on farmequipment.com in the event that you'd like to go back and review anything. You can watch your email in the Farm Equipment newsletter for more information on that. But on behalf of these gentlemen and TractorZoom, as well as the Farm Equipment staff, I would like to thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any thoughts on this event or anything you'd like us to cover in the future. Otherwise, I will say thank you to everybody again, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.